10-Minute University is a program of Clackamas County Master Gardener Association, offered in collaboration with and in support of the OSU Extension Service Master Gardener Program. At our website, you will find handouts, videos, upcoming classes, and workshops. And our program is volunteer-led, and we are supported by the OSU faculty to ensure the quality of our content. Welcome to today's webinar on garden wilding, creating habitat and restoring ecological function for wildlife and people. It was inspired by Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope. We'll be talking about the vital importance that home gardeners can play in restoring biodiversity. We can make a significant impact on the health of our planet simply by banding together and doing what we love, gardening. Our culture is of beautiful lawns and suburbs, vast quantities of lawns, mowing, blowing, mulching. And we have a way that we can take that culture and make a difference in our world, simply by changing how we think about gardening and what we plant. In May of 2023, the Washington Post published an article entitled Why Birds and Their Songs Are Good for Our Mental Health. In the article, it cited recent studies that being around birds and hearing their songs has a positive effect on the feeling of well-being, and is shown to reduce depression, anxiety, and paranoia. The effect of listening to birds is shown to last for hours. The sounds of birds in nature is in danger of disappearing. Since 1970, we've lost nearly 3 billion birds in the US. In fact, there are an increasing number of species that are in danger of disappearing and some that we have already lost. What's causing this terrifying loss of life? Well, a lot of it has to do with us. We're changing the world to make it easy and convenient, often without thought to the long-term damage our actions are causing. The study found that streets with bird-friendly yards had almost twice as many species as those without. The study also indicated that the presence of a variety of native trees provided habitat complexity and is crucial to making these yards more bird-friendly. As humans take over more and more land, we cause catastrophic loss to the ecosystem. Large factory farms that grow thousands of acres in a monoculture, species that have natural predators crowd out our native plants and insects. The size of cities is increasing. We lose nearly 1 million acres of habitat loss every year. Well, you get the picture. But what can we do? We can't stop corporate agriculture, and we have very little immediate impact on climate change and water quality. But we can take stewardship of our own space. We have an opportunity to rid our properties of invasive species, and we can combat urban sprawl by creating natural habitat within our own yards. How do we make a difference? It's time to bring nature home. Start to reverse the damage that we've done to the environment. Turn back the clock, as it were. In this graph on the top shows the effects of human modification to the land going from right to left. It traces from wilderness on the right to dense urban cities on the left. On the bottom of the graph, we see how taking steps to put some of the wildness back into our world, we can slow down the degradation of our planet. And by consciously and thoughtfully reintroducing wilderness into our lives, even in a small measure, we can help heal the land and all the creatures that live on it, including humans. So how do we make a difference? Nature is not healing, lessons from the pandemic about the environment and public health. This is an article from the Yale Environment Review that cites studies that find that in human-dominated habitats, animals that are zoonotic, that is hosts that can transmit disease from person to animal and back again, there tend to be present at higher rates in habitats than in habitats that have not been disturbed by humans. Overall, the researchers conclude that the land use change around the world has resulted in the loss of global biodiversity. This outcome favors the survival of species that are zoonotic hosts. The more we change the planet, the less biodiversity the species that survive are the ones that are most likely to transmit diseases from animals to humans and vice versa. So how do we get from this to this? The culture of vast lawns with a few shrubs has been the go-to landscape design for suburbs all over the nation. But what if we took that land and changed it from the sterile environment to one rich with life? How do we get from this to this? There's a reason the picture on the left came up quickly and the one on the right took longer. The yard on the left can be put in within hours. The yard on the right, like anything worth doing, takes careful thought and time. You've heard of the slow food movement? Well, this is the slow garden movement, gardening with the respect for life and the incredible gift of nature. Enhancing wildlife habitat is especially important since over 75% of endangered species are found on private land. Today, we're going to learn the 5 steps to garden wilding and how to get along with the neighbors, HOAs, are you listening? And learn about the organizations and programs that will help you garden to become an official certified wildlife habitat. This is a really big subject, and I didn't have time to delve into a lot of things very deeply, but there is a wealth of information at the bottom of each slide. There's links to articles and information that we're talking about on the slide. And then there's also a repeat of all of those links at the end of the program. So you'll get that in your inbox within a day or two. You get the recording and all of the links as well. So there's 5 simple steps to reach the goal of increasing ecological integrity and decreasing human influence. Number 1, plant native. 2, minimize pesticides and herbicides. 3, protect the soil. Minimize, mulch, mow, and blow. And finally, provide the 4 basic needs for life. 5 simple steps. If we define simple as easily understandable, yes. If we've defined it as very little work or research, not so much. We're going to quickly look at 2 case studies to gain some insight into the process of rewilding your yard. Excuse me. Step 1, plant native. I was very glad to run across this article by the American Association of Landscape Architects. It kind of puts the whole wilding, planting native habitat creation into the, yeah, it's an official thing realm. A melding of goals for science, business, and people who love nature. When I read this list, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. So the 5 reasons to provide native plants. 1, unlike non-natives, native plants are healthier and stronger. Unlike non-natives, native plants create wildlife habitat in your yard. Unlike non-natives, plants help the environment. Unlike non-natives, plants are low maintenance. And native plants add splendor to your landscape. Splendor, that's a powerful word. I've seen some absolutely splendid non-native landscape designs, but healthier, stronger, habitat creating, environmentally useful, low maintenance, and splendid, now we're talking. Plant natives to an area are more likely to establish quickly and will naturally be hardier and healthier. Native plants have evolved over thousands of years, learning to thrive in particular areas. They grow in harmony with the environment and the soil, the water supply, the varying weather throughout all the seasons, and other native companions. Their root systems are deep, sometimes up to 15 feet, and they're acclimated to the soil, be it clay or sand, and the average precipitation, whether it's high or low. Their stems and leaves can handle harsh sun or buffeting winds, for example, and if that is the nature of their local environment. They're also part of a larger natural ecosystem. Plant natives create wildlife habitat in your yard. When native plants thrive in their original environment, they create a natural habitat for wildlife that is both beneficial to the environment and add life to your outdoor space. We think of the obvious pollinators, bees, birds, and butterflies, but these plants can also help create homes for small animals, warm and cold-blooded, and microscopic organisms in the soil. All these living things have jobs to do. The natural environment promotes a symbiotic relationship. Speaking of creating wildlife habitat in your yard, I can't walk out my door without having to kind of duck from birds that are flying from place to place in the yard. There's so much biodiversity, cover, food for them. It's an exciting thing just to take a walk in my own yard. Insects rule. Plants are the primary resource of energy for all life on Earth, and insects makes up almost 85% of all known animal species. If you want to have insects, the little things that run the world, you've got to have the plants to support those insects. And those are going to be native plants. That's from Doug Tallamy. When native plants thrive in their original environment, they create a natural habitat for wildlife that is both beneficial to the environment and adds life to our outdoor space. We think of the obvious pollinators. Sorry, just read that. Urban forest and diverse understory vegetation provide habitat for native animals. Native plants support native insects, birds, mammals, native pollinators, and they supplement the honeybee pollination for gardens and farms. Birds, butterflies, and other wildlife provide great pleasure for city dwellers. Native plants help the environment. They require much less watering, fertilizer, and pesticides. In fact, they can prevent water runoff and improve air quality. Native plants can help decrease pollution because they eliminate the need for mowers and other equipment. Native plants have the ability to pull and store excess carbon. They also serve as a temperature sink. We've all heard of the heat island effect, familiar to all city dwellers. The solid, unshaded surfaces dominating cities can increase maximum temperatures by as much as 45 degrees Fahrenheit over shaded areas. Trees and vegetation which provide shade and evapotranspiration can reduce peak summer temperatures greatly, increasing human comfort and reducing the amount of energy and need for cooling. All right, native plants are low maintenance. The long-term upkeep of native plants can be dramatically less costly than turf grass, as well as take less time. The EPA cites a study of larger properties that estimates that over a 20-year period, the cumulative cost of maintaining a prairie or a wetland totals $3,000 per acre versus $20,000 per acre for non-native turf grasses. Native plants in natural associations require minimal applications of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. Being adapted to local conditions, they have greater drought resistance. Little or no irrigation is needed. They're likely to be winter hardy, so they may not need replacing less often. If lawns are replaced with associations of shrubs, trees, and understory plants, the expense of constant lawn mowing, feeding, watering, and edging is also waived. Native plants add splendor to your garden. This is a mix of native and ornamental plants that work well together. Add the structure of the water feature that is a huge draw for birds, insects, and amphibians, and you've got a great habitat. The back part of this area is a rain garden that fills up during heavy rains, but it's dry all summer long. It is watered infrequently, only during the hottest periods. During the heat dome we had a couple of years ago, we put patio umbrellas to shade the water, and we have had a great blue heron and mallard ducks visit us. It took the goldfish months to recover from the heron's visit, those that were left. Before I retired, I worked with many couples. Many couples where one was an engineer and the other was an artist. They often approached a problem completely differently, and it was my job to find solutions that worked for them both. The 5 reasons to use native plants from the American Society of Landscape Architects has created an excellent and professional list that I would present to the engineer-minded person. Now I'd like to introduce the list that might speak more to the artist. Nancy Lawson is a treasure. Her book, The Humane Gardener, has been called as a very important book that everyone with a container gardener to a postage stamp yard to a large piece of property should read. And Gardenisa says Lawson's passionate plea to be humane includes practical and low-cost solutions to enable us to cohabit peacefully with the wildlife in our yards. So Nancy's top 5 reasons. The squirrel by your lamppost isn't going to grill you for dinner. In other words, the open savanna that our ancestors had to have to see if there were predators coming is really no longer a threat. For animals, the risks of our lawn obsession are far greater. Negative impacts of turf grass on wildlife only second to those of roads. You can run your own B&B. When I really started to focus on providing great bee habitat, I'd get up early in the morning and was surprised to see bumblebees quietly resting on their favorite flowers. I was surprised because I thought bees would just go someplace else to sleep. I was at an event and I asked Anthony Melifopoulos, who runs the Pollination podcast and works for OSU in bee health and diversity. And I said, why are they doing that? He explained that while the female bees sleep in the nest at night, the male bumblebees sleep out under the stars. Sometimes they'll sleep in a flower that closes up at night, like a California poppy. Truly a bed and breakfast backyard. Your nightlife will sparkle. Oops. Now for Nancy, she lives in a place where they have fireflies. So there's that little bit sparkle at night. We don't have that here, at least not that I've ever seen, but it is wonderful if you've got a native habitat just to sit quietly, and you can often watch bats going by. You can hear frogs. It's a very peaceful and lovely sound. And you'll be popular. Number 4, you'll be popular with eccentric foodies. Just as monarchs must lay eggs on milkweed, most other insects are also specialists, able to digest chemical compounds found only in certain native plants with which they've co-evolved. Growing indigenous plants supports their survival, along with that of the birds and other animals that will eat them. And you can be lazy and cheap. Birds are the best gardeners. The more natives you give, the more you get back in the form of surprise seeds they've gathered from journeys across your yard. This spring alone, I have 4 native white oak trees, Gary oaks, and I have found ferns growing in places that I had no intention of planting them, but they look great. So creating that ecosystem where life can thrive, it's easy and it's cheap. So if you've committed to becoming a garden wilder, here's how to get started. The top picture is the picture from Google of the property I bought in 2011. Yeah, half an acre of that. So, lots of weeds, blackberries, so many blackberries. So you have to assess the site. What have you got? Got sun, shade, vegetation? What kind of water have you got? What needs to go? In my case, I knew immediately that the blackberries and the ivy had to go. And we had, the house was abandoned for many, many years. And so the backyard was almost totally blackberries. That was fun. And then you need to research what plants will work for you. Right plant, right place. Make a plan. This was one of my big mistakes. At that time, I was interested in native plants, but it wasn't a passion. So I chose a lot of plants that were not native, and I eventually found out were really not good for the environment. I did not have a plan. So if you got a chance to start from scratch and go get it right for the first time, I would suggest that. And then find suppliers that have the plants that you want. Sometimes, I mean, I have found things that, oh, I really want that plant and I can't find it in a nursery, but if I can ask them, and oftentimes they can order it. Check your native plant sales in your area and connect with garden groups and friends who are willing to share. When you make your plan to plant in layers. There are 5 different vegetation levels, 4 or 5, depending on who you're talking to. The overstory canopy are the big 30 feet or higher trees, like the Oregon white oak, western red cedar, Douglas fir. These are where the raptors, the large birds hang out. The understory canopy is the smaller trees. In our area, that would be vine maples, cascara. And then there's the large shrub layer, Indian plum, serviceberry. I swear the serviceberry I'm going to put in my understory canopy. It's so big at this point. And then the small to medium shrub layer, salal, native ferns, and then the ground layer, inside out flower, western red columbine. The ground layer, one of my most favorite plants these days is a Mahonius repens, creeping. I've lost the word. Anyway, it's a beautiful evergreen plant, and it comes out bronze in the summer, and then it gets bronzy again in the winter. Yellow flowers, Oregon grape, creeping Oregon grape, and it's really filling in nicely, fairly quickly. And I found it and just thought, well, I'm going to try a few of those. It's been amazing. So when you plant in layers, trees can be an excellent food source for pollinators, and we often don't think about that. Some are a great source of food in the early spring. In our region, vine maples provide early blossoms, and big leaf maples are a bee favorite. If you're lucky enough to have a large canopy tree, take good care of it. After the heat dome, we had an arborist out to take a look at some of our birch trees, and he noticed that our very large Doug fir looked thirsty. I never thought about it, because when I look at the fir at my eye level, it's so big, all I see is bark. I can't see the needles or anything, and I just wasn't paying attention. Climate change and pests are also limiting factors on choosing which trees to plant. These days, western red cedar is really not recommended because it's getting too hot and too dry for them to thrive. Ash trees are succumbing to the invasive emerald ash borer, and that will likely decimate our ash population in the coming years. So choose your investment plants carefully. And by investment, I'm talking about the years it takes to get to maturity, not necessarily money. Now, here's my favorite native plant resources. We're going to start nationwide. The Xerxes Society has absolutely incredible resources on how-tos, what plants, where. It's an incredible resource. And you can punch in your region, and then it will give you a list of native plants. And the database is searchable by, it has a bounty of guidelines to help you plan, install, and maintain your native plants. Another native plant resource that is nationwide is the National Wildlife Federation. And that gives you, you can search by zip code, and then it gives you lists of plants native to your area. The big bonus is that it gives you the species of moth or butterfly that is attracted to a specific plant. The birds planted 3 willow trees in my yard, and I have one that's a pussy willow and one that is a 2 that are a scaller's willow. And I figured that out by using the Picture This app on my phone. I was thrilled to find that the scaller's willow is host to 312 species of butterflies and moths in my area. The plants will have to be relocated to a more appropriate spot. But this fall, but what a bounty I'm providing for butterflies and moths. Oregon Flora, we're going down to our state. It's an amazing website, and you can search by plant height, flower color, when it blooms, what wildlife it supports, how long it lives, etc. It also has a selection to choose the right plant for your garden or landscape. Given the many, many mistakes I've made in the 11 years I've been living here, using this would have saved a lot of money, time, and heartache. Willamette Valley, narrowing down even more. The native plants for Willamette Valley yards is available online, but you can also find the booklets in many places. It's a wonderful booklet available in print, and it's easy to carry with you when you go to a nursery. It's a good quick reference for size, light, and moisture needs, and available, like I said, in booklet form. So when you go to a nursery, I've often had people say, "What is that you're looking at?" And I can show them and talk about native plants. We lost a gigantic birch tree a few years ago, and I wanted to choose a replacement tree. Quaking aspen is one of my favorite trees, but they don't tolerate drought well, and they're not super useful to anyone other than birds. My other choice was a big leaf maple that I was thinking about because I had heard it was so beneficial to bees. Look at the wildlife it supports. My decision was made. It's now 4 years old and going gangbusters. It also shades the east side of my house in the summer, which gets really, really hot. And when it gets big again, I have a big tree there again. It will really help the comfort and my electricity bills. Now the native plant resources list for Portland. It's a fantastic resource. It's only available online, but it goes into great detail about each plant community, when plants flower, what color they are. It's perfect if you're trying to plant a continual source of food for pollinators. The Garden Ecology Lab is another one of the places that I go to figure out what I want to plant. They've been involved in some fascinating research on pollinator plants, and this graph is of the top 10 flowers for bees. The outer circle represents how many native bees visited, and then the inner circle represents the diversity, what different types of bees were there. I was thrilled to find out that 2 of the top ones, Douglas aster and California poppy, are also 2 of my favorite plants. They reseed year after year. The Douglas aster maybe a little too enthusiastically, and sometimes I have to discipline it. But they're just terrific plants and obviously terrific for pollinators as well. Sometimes it's hard to find the true natives in most nurseries, but native cultivars or nativars are often readily available. The folks at the Garden Ecology Lab asked the question, do the bees care? And the answer is, it depends. In the chart, the true native plants have a box around each one. And then on the list on the right, the name underscore followed by 2 letters is the cultivar. For example, SMB underscore SN is a cultivar, the Salvie Snow for Douglas aster. It has white petals. One of the native art differences that Doug told me is that the color of leaf has more to do with the attractiveness to insects than the color of flower. So you can see in the baby blue eyes, the camas, and the yarrow, the bees don't really care that much. In others, it made a big difference. The California poppies, is, right here, this one, they obviously like the original more than the cultivars. But plant a nativar rather than planting an alien or an ornamental non-native, way to go. So how to prepare your site? Oh, this is huge. There's so many different ways that you can do it. Solarization, where you take and you spread plastic and you leave it and you basically are killing all of the heating up and killing all the weeds and seeds that you've got or plants. This is a Xerxes Society publication, so it goes into great depth. And some of the things here, like the repeated slow, shallow cultivation is really something that, you know, again, it takes time. You just go over and over and over. The soil inversion takes equipment, so that's really not for the home gardener, but any of these other things can. Sheet mulching, people often talk about gathering cardboard boxes and newspapers and stuff. Well, I have a half-acre yard, and it was really hard to find that much cardboard. Just didn't want to take the time. So I got rolls of cardboard packing that I could get in 100-foot rolls, and I could get them 3 or 6 feet wide, and I could just take it and roll it out. It was really efficient and it worked very, very well. Sod removal is hard work, but it's effective. So take a look at these. They give you the pluses, the minus, when it's good, good to use it, and when it's not. Now, removing invasives on your site. Blackberries, yeah. People often ask me, how do I permanently get rid of Himalayan blackberries? My answer is always, you don't. I often think of the movie Poltergeist, when the little girl tells the family that the evil spirits are back, and she goes, they're here. That's kind of like blackberries. But if you go through, cut them down to the crowns, then dig up the crowns, you're going to make a big step in getting rid of them for now. Like I say, birds are good gardeners, and they don't always just plant things that we want. So get your loppers, your weed whacker with a metal blade, and the root slayer shovel. Game changer on that one. Wear heavy gloves and long sleeves, and be prepared with replacement plants to help discourage blackberries from returning. And then monitor your site at least once a month for the first year, and grab those little suckers the minute they come up. It's so much easier. This is my arm after the 9th truckload of blackberries that we pulled off of our yard, and there were 3 more truckloads to go. So it's a big project, but once it's done and you can keep up with it, you've made great strides. Ivy is another huge invasive that will be transported by birds and takes over huge swaths of native forests. It will kill a tree over time, but if you kill the ivy at the base by cutting around the entire tree where the ivy is climbing up, the top part eventually dies and the tree can live. This is 2 of my heroes. Not all heroes wear capes. Some cities have ivy removal squads that will assist public spaces and private homeowners by tackling big removal projects. These 2 guys are volunteers, and this is near Tryon Creek Park. And to get to the tree that they were trying to save, they had to hack their way with machetes through blackberries to get to the tree. And if you look right here, this is the size of the ivy that was growing up that Douglas fir tree. Here's, excuse me, a log that cut up where they'd taken, the tree had died and they were just trying to remove the ivy and get the tree going. And then in back here, again, is more of that old growth ivy. It's brutal. And the older ivy gets, the more seeds it puts out. And it's just nasty stuff. So if you've got a yard and you've got ivy in it, take it down. Here's a list on how to remove invasives. And it's, again, here's the site that you can use. I think about when I was talking with my neighbor down the street about this webinar, and she said, so what's it about? And I said, well, it's garden wilding. And she looked at me and she said, Leah, she said, I spent a year taking ivy and blackberry off of my lot. Why would I want to do that again? Garden wilding is not just leaving it go. It's a stewardship and taking care of the land. So you take care of your land, you've got that much less stuff that's going to be transported to the world around you and cause problems. Okay, so we plant natives, and now we're going to minimize pesticides with integrated pest management. And that's a system of creating healthy plant development and beneficial insects that are less hospitable to pests and diseases. One of the big things on integrated pest management is deciding what you can tolerate. And as you get more and more used to native plant gardening, you learn you can tolerate more. It's much better to have a few holes in your leaves than spray pesticides that not only kills the culprit, but every bee and butterfly that dines on the same plant, and the bird that eats the bee for lunch. It's a huge cycle of death. This is a new way of looking at the world. I never thought I would go out and see chewed leaves and think, oh, good, it's working. Caterpillars for the birds. Another reason to minimize pesticides is that often we're taking away things that are really part of the huge ecosystem that we're trying to develop. Growing up in Sacramento, California, we usually had tomato plants in the summer. Sacramento is a prime tomato growing region, and you could smell the Campbell Soup Factory for miles when they were making tomato soup. If I went out to get a tomato and found one of these guys, I would shudder in disgust and kill it immediately. Nowadays, I'd take a wait and see approach. How many leaves is this guy going to eat? Are there brothers and sisters around that are going to totally kill the plant? Or have I got enough room to share my plant with these caterpillars? Because what this evolves into is this beautiful five-spotted moth. I can't remember the actual name of it. It flies at night. It feeds on white flowers that are highly scented. And it's really good bat food as well. It can be 5 inches long. And then the caterpillar also serves as a breeding ground for a beneficial parasitic wasp. You can see that on the left. So the wasp lays her eggs, they hatch, they eat the caterpillar from the inside, and then they go on and continue with the circle of life. Soil. Understanding soil, I never thought would be as fascinating as it is. Here's one of our master gardeners' handouts that talk all about soil, so you can get a good basic idea of what's going on there. When I was becoming a master gardener, I took a class from Jen Aaron on soils. And I learned that a fistful of soil contains 100 million bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, up to 5,000 insects and worms, all in a handful of soil. It's a huge store of biodiversity. Filters our water. There are more organisms in a tablespoon of soil than there are people on the planet. After taking this and getting a new respect for the soil, I had a nightmare one night, and I told Jen about it. I said, I dreamed I stepped on my garden bed and I was killing all of these these wonderful beneficial creatures. She said, good, my work here is done. So treat your soil gently. Don't work it when it's wet. It destroys the structure of the soil. One of the first things I did when I moved to this is I've got room for a great vegetable garden, so I ordered a rototiller. Well, the day it came, it was pouring down rain, but I only had it for a day, so I went ahead and I rototilled, big plot of land for my big vegetable garden. Now I understand that I probably did a couple of years worth of damage by doing all of that. So wait until the soil's the appropriate texture to work it. And amend it with quality compost. Soil is healthiest when it's also got a good plant cover and helps retain moisture and the leaves, but leaves access for insects and birds. Practice no-till methods. There's a great article on a no-till garden that I think you would enjoy if you take a look at it. Again, that's in the links at the end. Minimizing mulch, mow, and blow. We're kind of designed to, again, have the big yards, big lawns, big shrubs, and not a whole lot of things going on. And then everything's covered up with mulch, so it looks nice and tidy. And it does. I love the look and especially the smell of a garden freshly mulched. It's also so tidy. Mulch does help suppress weeds and it keeps the soil moist longer. But 70% of our native bees are ground-dwelling bees. And that's a big number. And we rarely see evidence of their living arrangements, but they need to be able to find actual soil. Bumblebees also nest in the ground. And this is a video of a bumblebee looking for a place to establish her nest. Now, if this were covered with with mulch, she wouldn't be able to find it. I often see bumblebees in this behavior, and I want to take them over to a little abandoned rodent hole or something. Say, here, go over here. I've got a great spot for you. But to blend into the neighborhood, if you want to make the neighbors happy, you can mulch the front of your bed, but then leave soil in the back parts that people can't see as much. And then also a good ground cover of native plants can help make things look tidy. Mowing alternatives, lawn maintenance and climate change. This is an article about how the problems and solutions to traditional lawn care. Small motor gasoline powered equipment is a significant contributor to climate change. Off-road gasoline-powered equipment such as lawnmowers and leaf blowers emit approximately 242 million tons of pollutants annually, just as much as cars and homes. What do? Cut down on your lawn area so you've got less that you have to take care of, and then switch to battery-powered or electric mowers. It's cleaner, it's quieter. When we were at the Spring Garden Fair, there was a display of battery-powered gardening equipment. And we had several landscaping contractors come by. And these are the guys that come out and actually do the work. And he said, so what do you think of electric battery-powered equipment? And many of them had switched it. And they just said, oh, it's so wonderful because doesn't smell, it doesn't stink. So all of that's going into the air, and all of that is going into the lungs of the people that are doing the work. Changing to batteries is really a great solution. Leaf blowers. Household leaf blowers blow at 150 to 190 miles per hour. Commercial 200 to 239. So if you're taking and you're blowing into your garden beds, you're blowing apart both insect habitats and the insect. Just think of what it would feel like to be all snuggled up in a bed of leaves, a little caterpillar, waiting to pupate. And then a leaf blower comes by at 200 miles an hour and just blows the heck out of everything. Switching to a battery-powered leaf blower is not going to help with that, but you will get cleaner air. Operating a gas-powered commercial leaf blower for 1 hour is the equivalent air pollution of driving a Toyota Camry 1,000 than 100 miles. So if you need to use a blower, keep going to hard surfaces and out of the garden beds to protect the insect sheltering there. Everybody, all life has 4 basic needs. We need food, we need water, shelter, and places to raise our young. Certified wildlife habitats confirm that property owner commitment to providing the 4 elements of habitat, food, water, cover, and places to raise young while practicing sustainable gardening and landscaping made a real difference. So giving them good things to eat, places to sleep, keeping away from pesticides. It's best to have food available that is part of your growing garden. Bird feeders are great and, handy, but you'd be surprised to learn that 96% of all terrestrial bird species raise their young on insects. Flies, beetles, and crickets may be on the menu, but caterpillars are particularly important. So raising plants that will provide caterpillar habitat are going to help protect the birds. And we just need to learn to live with caterpillars and get excited when they come by. Water. All these different species have different ways of gathering water. And so we can do our best to provide what they need. Providing a 10-foot section of water for a bat to fly over is probably not in a lot of people's bailiwick, but that's what they need. Birds like shallow water to splash in, and low to the ground with a little bit of cover so that they're protected from predators from above is really beneficial. And then the sound of water also attracts birds. So you've got something low, fairly shallow, with a little bit of noise, they're going to be happy. Bees and other insects also need a shallow place. So I created this bee and butterfly watering hole where there's water in it. It's shallow. I've got rocks where they can choose what depth they're going to be at. The butterflies can kind of take their sun baths there. And then on the right is well-rotted manure. Butterflies don't really need to drink water so much, but they get the moisture from nectar, but they need the chemicals, the minerals that are in the well-rotted manure. So providing that is also a great way to help support butterflies. Shelter, again, is really important. This weekend, one of my relatives in Spokane was talking about a hawk that went after a chickadee in her yard, and the chickadee scooted underneath a brush pile that she had there. The chickadee lived, the hawk left sad. All of these things can find shelter in just a simple pile of sticks, easy to do. I have 3 in my yard and I keep them tucked away in corners. Nobody sees them, but the critters sure like them. I just recently got an article in my email about this couple, and then I found on Facebook talking about it. And what happened was they had a native yard, and their homeowners association, particularly one guy, really complained about what they were doing, and that it was attracting rodents and snakes and nasty things. So he tried to stop them. The homeowners association got involved. They filed a complaint with the city council, and then a state legislature heard about it and went to bat and gathered a whole bunch of wildlife groups, and they made a law that it was okay to have a native garden, that homeowners associations could not prohibit native gardens. After spending $60,000 on lawyers' fees, they say it was worth it. Their lawyer has resolved not to use pesticides, and when part of a tree fell in his yard, he left it for habitat. They did settle with the HOA, agreeing to remove plantings within 3 feet of the neighbor's land and 6 feet of the sidewalk and replace them with some sort of grass. So they chose native sedge. This is just working with the neighbors, getting a messy wildlife garden to look good so that the neighbors are happy, mow the edges, create line of sight, structure focal points, placing plants in drifts so that it all looks cohesive, and always err on the side of flowers. If you work with your neighbors, you can create conservation corridors so that the habitat has more places to go. Case study in planting native. This was my house in 2011, lawn, rhododendron weeds, not the good kind. This is the house in 2023. I took this picture yesterday. Maple, western red cedar, vine maples, willow, Pacific dime, all of these things. Not visible are 2 rain gardens from disconnected downspouts, one along the right side of the photo and another here near the house by the path. And there's my wildlife, certified wildlife signs. In working with the neighbors and creating habitat that looks structured, we've got a path that helps make, everything look intentional, some garden art, and a little bit of lawn that my husband really, really loves and takes care of. So in the back, we've got, this is a case study for removing invasives and adding natives, plus ornamentals and water feature. I love lots of different kinds of gardens. I love native gardens, but I also have things that speak to me. When my neighbor's house sold her house, it's now being torn down and a giant thing is being built across it. But I took some of her roses and her peonies, some of her ground covers. So I've got a little bit of Annie in my backyard. So this is what it looked like. Lawn, again, blackberries. This is what it looks like now. So we've got native plants, we've got a pond for habitat, all kinds of native plants mixed in with ornamentals, and it's a happy place. So you can get your badge of honor by going to these 3 sites, and there's terrific resources for how to get where you're going, what's going to work for you. Backyard Habitat will actually come out to your house and do an assessment and tell you what you need to do and give you a list of this is how you can be certified. Homegrown National Park is one of my favorite. That's Doug Ptolemy's organization, and it's basically getting to have a network of homegrown national parks where you take your garden and you commit to biodiversity and native planting, and we're trying to make this spread throughout the nation. My yard is registered. And then we've got the resource list. So lots of pages. Again, Doug Ptolemy's book, Nature's Best Hope, super, super inspiring. And I would encourage everybody to read or listen to it. And I've gone over what I had intended to talk to. So now.
Hi, Leah.
Hi, do we have any questions?
Thanks for a great presentation. The thing that I appreciated the most about your presentation is that you gave people the permission to, this is an evolutionary process. This is not something that takes place like snap instantly. You need to think about what large trees you want to plant and what you need to be intentional about what you're going to do. And to please the neighbors, you need to make it look somewhat like so there's a little balancing that has to go on there.
Yeah.
We did have some questions.
Okay.
One question was, are native plants still best? Because this individual was looking toward Mediterranean type plants using xeriscaping to minimize the use of water. So she's wondering, are native plants still best or not?
They actually are, because a lot of our native plants will take, very, very little water. They thrive on little to no water. Always remember the first year you've got to get them established. Mediterranean plants, while they're lovely and they take less water, are not going to provide food, and habitat for all of the different animals that are native to our area. So a moth is going to maybe drink the nectar from a Mediterranean plant, but the caterpillars will not be able to feed on that. They need, caterpillars particularly need very specific plants from the area that they're from. So.
Okay, great answer. And that's a great answer. Quickly, one person did want to know where you got your rolls of cardboard. She's taking her lawn out.
I got it. My first batch I got from Uline when I worked, and they would deliver it to the place that I worked for not very much money. Their delivery fees are a little more expensive for homeowners. So I went to Amazon and I found rolls of cardboard there.
That's
At
right.
a fairly decent price.
Yeah, it's good. We just had a quickie question, which is kind of a good one. So when you have these little saucers of water that you put out for insects and so forth, someone wanted to know about mosquitoes. How often do you change that water so that you don't get mosquitoes hatching all over your backyard?
That's a really good question. And, it's really funny. I do not have mosquitoes in my backyard. Part of that is because I have so much bird and bug life that they keep it down. Another thing is mosquitoes are in still stagnant water. And so if I've got, say, like a bird bath that, I either keep it cleaned out daily, or I provide some kind of fountain, which they
Moving
love
water.
anyway, so that the water is moving. So
yeah, I think it takes 7 days for a mosquito to lay eggs and hatch. So if you change the water every few days, you're okay.
yeah.
Don't let it molder there for months. But
I did not know that, because it's something I don't have to deal with.
Okay, stewardship. You talked about, your garden, once you plant natives, so you don't just walk away. Some people may have the impression that if you plant native plants, then, oh gosh, I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about these plants anymore. But you mentioned stewardship, monitoring your yard for the intrusion of invasives, particularly if you've attracted lots of birds and other wildlife. You may find that invasives do crop up.
Oh yeah, they love to. They love to. And stewardship also in adverse weather events. We had rain, and then we got really, really hot. And because I have soil that is not mulched, it dried out really quickly. I raised mason bees, and so there wasn't any mud for my mason bees. So I had to think, okay, I need to go out and make some mud for the mason bees. When we had the heat domes, I had water and shade, not only in the understory, but I put out umbrellas and places, cooling stations for the wildlife. And then monitoring the plants too, because even though they're native, some of them, it was just too hot, like my tree. So part of being a habitat gardener is paying attention to the habitat, and that's the joy in it for me.
I noticed in this in our life today, the changes in climate are sudden, which makes it imperative that you monitor.
It happens so fast. I mean, look at last week and this week. I'm happy for this week. It's lovely, but it's just, we really kind of have to pay attention.
Exactly. There was one of our participants, it lives on the coast, and she was a little bit dismayed to learn mulching wasn't, she said, I have all sand. How can I not mulch? What advice would you give her?
Well, if you have all sand, you probably, that's not the kind of thing that I'm not sure, but don't really know that native bees are nesting in sand. That doesn't seem like a thing that would happen. So again, site specific, know what you're doing and what you're working with.
And checking with her local Lincoln County Master Gardeners.
Yes.
They are very active and will have good advice.
It was really fun doing the research for this and looking at different Master Gardeners organization throughout the United States. And I know people, watch these webinars who aren't from necessarily our area. So I like to include things that, okay, so here's the resources and this is where you can find out what's going to work for your area.
Exactly, exactly. When you mentioned trees, one person did wonder about oaks, varieties of oaks that might be planted for your yard, as a native. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I have a massive oak tree of my neighbors in the back, that it's such a gift. It's so beautiful and it's so great. And this year I found 3 oaklings. I've got one that's in my vegetable garden. And I talked with my husband about it and I said, you know, this is going to shade the vegetable. And he said, by the time this is big enough to shade the vegetable garden, we're going to be happy to let it shade the vegetable garden and not be growing vegetables in our 90s. I think oak trees are amazing. They're really on the decline because they're being cut down. So if you don't want something huge right away, I would go for a Gary oak any day of the week. They're incredible.
Oh, they're so beautiful. They are so beautiful. I
So
know.
beautiful.
I know. But they are a generational tree. They grow slowly.
Yes.
It is a generational thing. So you're
Yeah.
right. There is one question we did get that was kind of interesting. This gentleman has a fruit tree in his backyard and was told by a person who came to spray for codling moth for him that if he didn't spray with harsh chemicals, that he was contributing to the spread of codling moth throughout the region, and he just needed to do it as a responsible citizen.
Oh, there's a
That's a
line.
guilt trip if I ever heard one.
You know how I handle codling moths? I have apple trees and I have little apple tree socks. And so we go ahead and we thin to the amount of apples that we want. And then we take a little sock and we put it over the apples. And we have no codling moth problems at all that way. So there
Great.
are always ways to.
There are other alternatives.
I mean, so, you know, I think is, okay, so we're going to spray and kill all the moths. And then the birds are going to eat it. And then we're going to kill all the birds. And yeah.
Right. There's a balance to life.
There is. Yeah.
And that ends our questions. Thanks for doing such a great job on those.
Well, thank you.
They're a bit tricky.
I'm so glad people came, and I really encourage you to, again, take a look at the links and the resources. There's some just terrific stuff there.
I agree. Thanks so much, Leah.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, everyone.